Israel says it's now recovered the bodies of 2 Israeli-American hostages held by Hamas. The IDF says Gadi Haggai and his wife, Judy Weinstein-Hagi, were killed in the October 7th attack. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says their remains were recovered in a special operation. Meanwhile, Gaza's Hamas-run government says 3 journalists are dead after an Israeli strike in the courtyard of a hospital in Gaza City overnight. The IDF responded saying the strike targeted a terrorist. Let's bring in IDF spokesperson Nadav Shoshani for more on this. Nadav, thanks for coming on. I want to start with the recovery of the bodies of these 2 hostages. Where did Israeli forces find them, and do you think this could lead to more hostages being found?
Well, this is exactly the type of warnings we are wishing for and operating for every day. A little bit of bittersweet because we obviously want to recover live hostages. But this was a result of a planned operation based on intelligence that we have been collecting for a while. As you know, since the beginning of the war, we've been collecting intelligence to find and locate our hostages. And this was a special operation conducted by our forces alongside the Israeli Security Service, the Shin Bet, overnight in Khan Yunis. And in the special operations, we were able to find the bodies of Judy and Gadi. Judy and Gadi were murdered on October 7th by Hamas. We're speaking about Israeli Americans in their 70s. Judy was a special ed educator, and Gad was a cook in the kibbutz kitchen. They were murdered, and their bodies were taken as a ransom, as a bargaining chip into Gaza and held over 600 days. We were able to recover their bodies through this special operation. We were able to conduct a quick process of identification in Israel, forensic identification, and notify the family, and obviously very happy results. This is why we're operating in Gaza. This is why I returned to service. This is why many of my friends risk their lives on a daily basis. Sadly, some of them even lost their lives in this special mission to bring out those civilians, those people, grandparents, out of Gaza, out of the arms of terrorists. And the people who held them are the same terror group who held the Bibas family, who held a mother and 2 babies in Gaza for hundreds of days, also holding the body of the baby as a bargaining chip with Israel. And this is who we're fighting. This is what we're fighting for. And we'll keep operating until all 56 remaining hostages are home.
I also want to ask you about this strike in the courtyard in a Gaza City hospital. It reportedly killed 3 journalists. The IDF says it was targeting a member of Palestinian Islamic Jihad and that steps were taken to mitigate harming civilians. But Gaza's Hamas-run government says 225 journalists have been killed since the start of the war. So what is being done to limit these journalist casualties?
Well, I think that's a great question. And first, I want to emphasize the idea of targets and operates to eliminate terrorists, to fight those terrorists. We're doing everything we can to fight those terrorists throughout this war. We've put out millions of warnings before we enter a zone or before we operate in a zone. The IDF is essentially giving up the most important element in the battlefield, which is the element of surprise, to make sure that civilians get a chance to get out of harm's way. And we're facing Hamas, this terror organization that has never worn uniforms throughout this war. The last and only time I've seen them wear a uniform since October 7th was in those ceremonies in the ceasefire. So we're facing an enemy that purposely hides behind civilians. We are facing an enemy that uses international symbols like schools, hospitals, and journalists as a disguise for their terror operations. And I can speak about what happened this morning. We targeted an Islamic Jihad operation. I can say this with full knowledge, and I can say with high certainty, he was also the person that we got in this strike. And I believe in coming hours, we'll be able to put more information out. We've seen throughout this war, sadly, there were cases where journalists were caught in the crossfire between IDF and Hamas. But we've also seen many, many, many cases, and more to come on that, maybe as soon as today, about terrorists who are wearing a press vest trying to convince the world, trying to hide behind journalists or hide behind hospitals or schools or anything like that. And we're doing everything we can. And again, this wasn't an attack on a hospital, it was near a hospital. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we are targeting those terrorists and not innocent civilians, not journalists. I am personally in close relations with journalists, obviously every day as a spokesperson. This is not something we target. And I believe this is the same case in this incident. And I can speak about what I know, and what I know is we targeted an Islamic Jihad operative, a terrorist who wanted to kill our soldiers. And just in recent week, 4 soldiers were killed in the battlefield. They were killed by people who weren't wearing uniform. They were dressed as civilians. They were disguising behind civilian infrastructure. And this is what we're facing in Gaza. And we're doing our best to target those terrorists and to make sure that we're giving the best chance for the civilians to get out of harm's way. And we're also doing everything we can to make sure that those civilians get the right aid and get it directly without Hamas putting their hands on it.
What more can you tell me about this target that you say you did get in this strike?
As I said, and we have to evaluate the BDA, and we have to have the aftermath of this, and have, as we do in every strike, after every attack against a terrorist, after every strike we conduct, we learn from it. We want to see if we succeeded. We want to see if not. If there are cases that are not good, we investigate ourselves. We hold the people accountable. In this case, in this incident, according to the initial inquiry, it was a strike conducted against an Islamic Jihad terrorist. I can't go into more details about who he was. I believe I will be able in a few hours to declassify that intelligence. And we were operating against someone whose goal was to kill IDF soldiers and kill civilians. And we know he was personally involved in terror, and he was part of the Islamic Jihad.
And you talked about ensuring that people can safely get aid. The American Israeli-run Gaza Humanitarian Foundation says 2 distribution centers are now back open in a limited capacity. Now, earlier this week, Israeli forces opened fire at or near 2 of those sites. That led to dozens of deaths. And after Tuesday's incident, an Israeli military source told ABC News that a handful of IDF troops opened fire after thousands of people moved toward them, that they saw this big crowd, fired warning shots, and then opened fire. You're saying you guys are taking measures to ensure that people can safely get aid. And I know the foundation actually asked for more safeguards and more training for the IDF. So talk to me about that. What's being done to try to ensure that people who are hungry and trying to get food are able to do so safely?
So I'm very glad for the opportunity to speak about this, because I think it's important to kind of make what's the truth and what is things that are coming out by organizations that are run by Hamas. The civil defense or the Gaza Health Ministry, as you said, they are run by Hamas. They put out misinformation. In this case, this is a project that IDF put a lot of manpower and a lot of preparations to make this area ready for the organization to run, this American organization to run. We are doing everything we can to make sure that the civilians can get. And I want to tell you, there were no incident, no one was killed or hurt in those distribution sites. What did happen was in areas where people are not supposed to be, in hours they are not supposed to be, hundreds of meters away from the distribution sites, there were a few incidents, which we are trying to do our best. But at the same time, if we're talking about a small amount of soldiers facing a mass of people, approaching them, getting off of the designated route they're supposed to be on and headed towards our troops, they can't allow them to, hundreds of them, to approach them and endanger them. And they act according to procedure. But this is not cases in the distribution site. The IDF is not targeting the civilians. And more importantly, I want to tell you something. We understand Hamas wants to carry out terror attacks in the disguise of these civilians coming to get aid. We understand Hamas is trying to prevent these people from reaching the aid distribution site. They even went so far as to pretend and open fake accounts on social media to say the distribution sites were closed a few days ago. They went as far, we put a video out of gunmen shooting at civilians, trying to prevent them from reaching the distribution site. So we understand Hamas does not like this, because the aid is reaching the civilians directly, not through them. And we understand there's a real threat of Hamas trying to carry out terror attacks in the disguise of civilians coming to get aid. We have to be, at the same time that we're doing everything to facilitate it, be vigilant and make sure that Hamas doesn't carry out terror attacks. And as I said, 4 soldiers were sadly killed this week by Hamas terrorists, and we have to make sure in this war that at the same time that we're doing everything we can to support and facilitate the humanitarian campaigns of bringing aid into Gaza, that we are also staying vigilant and not allowing Hamas to kill our soldiers or kill our civilians. That's something no one wants to see.
And of course, soldiers have to protect themselves. And as you mentioned, this is about a quarter-mile away from the distribution site. But these corridors, right, the people who were killed here were unarmed. They were people just trying to get food. So what's being done to try to ensure that these massive crowds, the foundation is saying many more than they initially expected, are geared or guided into these safe zones and not, sort of more protected and prevented from straying into areas where they're going to be shot and killed?
So that's a great question, and as you know, the distribution site were closed yesterday. They were closed for us to take steps, and our organization to take steps to make sure that the routes are safer. And it's important to note this. The incidents did not happen. There's hours they're supposed to be on the routes, and during the nighttime, they're not supposed to be on the routes. During the nighttime, it is considered an active war zone. So we're also conducting an effort with our air platforms, and I know the organization is also running their efforts to make sure that the civilians are much more aware of when and where to come to and how to reach the distribution sites in a way that does not go against the protocol, against the designated routes and the designated times set, and also making sure that the conditions on the ground are better to make sure that by accident and not by accident, it is much harder for people to get off their designated routes. And again, as I said, we are committed to bringing aid into Gaza. We're committed to bringing aid to the Gazans and to make sure that Hamas doesn't put their hand on it. And we're fighting Hamas on the battlefield. We're also fighting Hamas on this aid battlefield. Hamas is trying to prevent the aid from coming in. And I think it's halfway across the world, it's hard to understand, but we're fighting for our lives here. And at the same time, we're fighting to bring aid to the area we're fighting in. We're fighting to bring aid to the area where 56 of our hostages are in. I want you to imagine a person whose grandmother's body is held ransom, held as a bargaining chip in Gaza, and at the same time, his friends are part of this mechanism trying to facilitate anti-Gaza. So we're committed to this. Hamas is committed to trying to fight this. It isn't easy. It isn't perfect. But we want to find a solution where the people of Gaza can get aid directly from the international community and not Hamas. We want the international community to make the people of Gaza stronger and have more aid, and not to make Hamas stronger. We want this war to be finished as quick as possible. If Hamas is weak, if we're able to dismantle them completely, if Hamas, or on their other end, if Hamas puts down their weapons and release the hostages, this war can be done as soon as possible, and that's what we're trying to achieve.
All right, Nadav Shoshani, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.